Hey guys, welcome to this week's podcast episode for the Financial Freedom Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Christopher Liu. And as you know, I've always been curious about the secret sauce to an extraordinary life. First thought it was just financial freedom, but a lot of my friends and colleagues who made it early on were extremely miserable. So then it boiled down to time, location, health, mental freedom, energy, and the ability to choose. So once I figured out that secret sauce, I was on a journey to find people that were embodying those traits, get those conversations in a centralized place, and share it with the world. So today, I'm happy to introduce Frank Mendoza of Catalytics, and it's gonna be a fascinating discussion about artificial intelligence. Really hot topic today with the ChatGPT release last November. And it's really this new technology is going to be an infrastructure layer. So we'll bring Frank and talk all about it. So Frank, welcome.
Thank you so much, Chris. I really do appreciate you having me. It's a pleasure to be here and talk about one of my favorite topics, of course, AI. Hopefully, I'm able to convey some value to your audience and get them a little bit up to speed in some of this high-end emerging technology.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm always on the outlook for trends, what's new, what can be game changing, what's going to take out the next big industry. Tell us more about your story, your journey, and how you got started.
Yeah, so my background is in mechanical engineering. That's where I got my undergrad, and I always say engineering taught me how to solve problems around problem solving, right? And one of those jobs that I had early in my career taught me about statistics and taught me about using data to solve problems. And that was a manufacturing organization that taught what at the time was considered Six Sigma, and I became a black belt in Six Sigma. Again, the concept of leveraging data to make decisions, leveraging data to get you to the root cause of what's actually trying to drive the challenge aligned with kind of my frame of thinking and aligned to kind of my engineering background. You forward about 15 years, and now the technology, the compute power, the cloud infrastructure, the algorithms all kind of have come together now and have created this new discipline called data science. And data science is leveraging that data to solve, again, those problems that tend to be a little bit bigger than the human mind can wrap its head around, right? So big data is what it used to be called, and data science, and now AI, right? So whether the terminology changes, it's still the same concept, which is leveraging that information, whether that be in the form of structured data, like what you would find in Excel, or that be information that you find in images and music and sound, or in text, for that matter. And so leveraging that type of data to kind of solve those problems. And that really is where I really enamored myself towards. And in 2015, I started Catalytics, and Catalytics was my attempt to hang a shingle and help organizations introduce some of these emerging technologies, some of these advanced analytics concepts and tools into their organization. And I've had the great pleasure of working with some Fortune 500 companies to really start to move the needle in terms of growing their revenue and impacting their cost initiatives as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because when I was undergrad, way back then, this idea of data science didn't exist, and then computer science was kind of this fringe. Younger audience out there listening, what's the difference between computer science and data science, and how do they interrelate?
Yeah, there's a lot of overlap. Computer science tends to be this overarching, if you will. It all has to do with you know the ways a computer works, right? How do you make a computer do what you want it to do? Data science is a subset of that to some extent, because you do need programming to get some of these things off the ground, right? So you want to leverage computer science, if you will, to build applications, whether those be web or mobile, to capture some of this data. But then once you have that data, what do you do with it? How do you make decisions based on it? How do you take that information and now translate that into maybe increased revenue or increased benefit and value to the end user? So it's taking that data that was collected often through computer science, right, in the applications, but then actually taking it and translating it into actual actionable type initiatives, if you will.
Interesting. Which brings us to the next question, because there's this great book by Peter Diamandis, and he's talking about how data is the new oil because everything is running on information and these these search engines, the algorithm, and
I actually don't like to use that analogy, right? So from my perspective, a lot of people use that data is the new oil. The challenge I have is not that it's not valuable, right? I actually look at it like this, right? It's not the new oil because oil is a resource that once it's used, it can no longer be used again. Once it's refined and burned, it can't be used again. Data is actually the opposite. Once you refine that data, get it in a position where you can actually take advantage, you can continue to take advantage of it. You can add it to other data and actually build on it. And so I actually think of it more like electricity, right? As AI is the new electricity because it's going to empower all these different industries. It's going to build upon itself. It's going to give the ability for organizations, industry, grow their potential, unlike anything else that we've seen in our lifetimes. Even above the internet, even I would think, I would argue.
I've never heard of that analogy, so that's really interesting. The new electricity, I like that. It kind of moves everywhere and it's abundant rather than scarce. So
it is, and it builds upon itself, right? I'm lighting my room, I'm lighting my, but together, right? The technologies and the lighting allow me to do something I wouldn't otherwise be able to do, right? And it's more than just oil, if you will.
Yeah. What would you say to businesses these days that when they talk about AI? Because I talked to a couple people and they say, businesses that you're either going to use AI in your business or you're going to be out of business. So what do you say to that?
I think that's a true statement. I think the reality is the future is coming. The wave is coming, right? And you can be I'm not a surfer, but I know the analogy, right? You're going to be crushed by the wave or you're going to ride the wave, right? And so it's really upon you as leaders within your organization, as individuals that want to become more productive and more efficient and more effective in their roles, to figure out how best to use AI. Now, the challenge is going to exist is make sure that it's not a FOMO, right? Just a fear of missing out, or it's a Me Too initiative, that it's really targeted towards what is the objective that I'm trying to get, and then how does AI augment that and allow me to really grow into my core competency or my competitive advantage, right? And so it's more than just a shiny object, right? I think a lot of organizations right now, a lot of people are taking a Me Too initiative, like, oh, well, someone else is using it, so we're going to use it. And I think that's going to be a challenge, honestly, Chris, because you really are going to, it takes a lot of investment, a lot of resources, a lot of energy to introduce some of this stuff into your organization, to your existing processes and procedures. And the result is, if it's not the right use case, you're going to be challenged, and it's not going to show a value that it would have otherwise if you had chosen the right prioritized use case.
And yeah, it's interesting. And I love these analogies that you're giving. What are some common misconceptions that business owners have about AI analytics? How do you address them?
Yeah, great question. Great question, because there are a lot of misconceptions, right? One in particular is only large organizations can take advantage of this technology, right? And that's not necessarily the truth. Like I mentioned, it's about prioritizing and identifying the right use cases, and then figuring out how do we gather the right data in order to give us a prediction. Now, that prediction might be something like ChatGPT, where you're predicting the next word in a sentence, for example, or it could be more of a structured prediction where you're trying to, for example, upsell a client or a customer, or maybe reduce a cancellation, for example, within an organization. So it's really identifying what is the problem that you're going after, and then how do you actually make sure that you're identifying the right use case to go after.
I love that. And the other thing is, so you talked about ChatGPT, and there's this big hype, especially with generative AI. Speak to that. Like, the different solve capabilities, platforms, what you're able to do.
Yeah. Right now, we are really on the precipice of what a very exciting time, as you can imagine, for someone like me. But I think a lot of people are starting to see the value in this what's considered generative AI, right? So there's more traditional AI. I hate to even use the word because 6 months ago it wasn't traditional; it was still AI. But I consider it traditional AI, or ML, machine learning. Where you're using kind of more structured data, more tabular data, and trying to make a prediction. Whereas the new introduction of this generative AI, which is, for lack of a better word, it's generating something, whether that be sound or music or text or images, even. That is really gotten people's going in terms of what is possible. And there are a number of tools, right? So ChatGPT is not the only text generation that's out there that's considered a large language model. But there's others as well. Bard just came out. Google just came out with Bard as their own large language model that you could be leveraging. There's other players as well. And then there's image generator, right? That if you want to generate an image, there's tools like Midjourney or Dolly or Stable Diffusion that you can, enter a prompt of some kind and it spits out an image. And then there's, even voice mimickers, right? So you could put 2 or 3 minutes of your voice, Chris, into a tool called 11 Labs, and you'll be astounded by how accurate it mimics your voice. The challenge, though, and some risk associated with leveraging these is bias. And for lack of a better word, the tool is just a tool. AI is just a tool. It could be used for good and for the benefit of humanity, and it could be used for bad and the not so good benefit of society, right? And I think that's where we are, as a society, going to be learning very quickly the areas where we need to be cognizant of beyond just privacy, right? Giving information over to these technologies. How do we ensure that things are not used maliciously or in a fraud like state? Those are going to be some of the challenges I think this next few years is going to try and teach us. And unfortunately, I think there are bad people with bad intentions out there. And just like any other tool, it could cause some harm.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's like deepfakes and been reading like some of these AI bots can interface with these API programs, and who knows what they can do, and which is going to be really interesting. It's going to be like kind of how social media evolved. Then you had like all these issues with social media. So
or the internet before that, right? I think whenever any new technology comes in, people are going to, again, attempt to stretch and push the envelope, push the boundaries of what's possible. I think it's going to be incumbent upon all of us to recognize when that is occurring and figure out what safeguards need to be put in place. Now, are there things that other organizations can do proactively? Absolutely. And I always encourage, as I work with clients, to think about some of the things. Do a post-mortem before you introduce some of these technologies. What could go wrong, and how do we make sure we're putting and mitigating that risk as much as possible? It's imperative that we do that as we start to introduce these technologies.
Yeah. We're coming close to the end of the conversation, but can you share, you're the founder of Catalytics, and can you share any examples of how AI data analytics have been used to enhance customer experience, improve customer engagement, making clients happy, and so on?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple examples. I'll give you one from a more traditional, what I consider traditional AI or ML, and then there's one from a generative AI. So we'll start with the generative because that's probably the higher value. I think the ability, it's leveraging that, smooth the burden, if you will, of some things, right? So generative AI, I really talk about with people is you have to have a mind shift from being a creator to an editor, right? And what I mean by that is you used to have a blank sheet of paper that you'd have to start from scratch. What generative AI does now is it gives you an image, or it gives you a text or something to work off of. And so you have to shift your mind from I have to create something from scratch to I have to edit something that's in front of me. I never tell anyone to take this information and just post it or publish it without first reviewing it. right? And so, I'm working with clients to start talking about how do we use this generative AI to start doing personalization. You can imagine how personalized you can actually get as you start to look at your clients, your consumers of your products and services, to say, how do I create text that is personalized to that individual given what I know about them? And so that's one way that, by giving more personalized, by better segmentation, you can offer better targeting, and the result being, better loyalty, better customer, brand recognition with your clients.
Yeah.
From a traditional kind of ML perspective, I worked with a client to help them with their cancellation. So they were having clients that were canceling on them. And what we did was we looked at data that was available within their organization to figure out what are the influencers that cause a person to cancel. Can we create an algorithm that would identify those people proactively so that the organization could then reach out to them individually and give them a bit of a white gloves treatment to ensure that they continued through with the service. And so, I always like to tell people, what would you have liked to known about before it happened, right? And in this case, love to know who's going to likely cancel so that we can get in front of it and actually address the issue. So those are two, traditional and a generative example of, how you're going to be able to leverage these technologies to offer, increased personalization, increased, generation of text or images for that personalization, and then figure out kind of how you use predictive analytics as well to start targeting and helping your clients and consumers through their customer journey.
Yeah. How do people contact you, follow you, find out more about the work that you do, reach out to you?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you, Chris. The best way right now is LinkedIn. If your audience, connects with me on LinkedIn, I tend to share a lot of information in terms of the work I'm doing or the concepts that I'm talking about right now on LinkedIn. And I would very much welcome kind of just let me know you heard of on this podcast and that what you might have found valuable. That'd be the best way to reach out to me.
And let's what a fantastic conversation. Let's thank Frank for coming onto the show, talking about this really new innovation. It's going to incorporate, blockchain and digital assets. It's going to be really, and the future is exponential. Again, he's on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, and all of those resources will be in the links and show notes. So reach out to him, find out more about this fascinating field. And thanks for coming onto the podcast.
Chris, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure and a fantastic conversation.